Hey, good morning. Welcome back to week 3. Today, I want to talk about supply chain and logistics. And the reason I want to start with this after talking about the history last week is the term supply chain and logistics are used a lot interchangeably, erroneously. They are not the same thing. We use them a lot interchangeably, but we shouldn't. I think the reason we do this is because the term logistics, as we kind of talked about last week, has been around for a long time. The term supply chain is relatively new, and we haven't done a good job in business and in the supply chain industry of telling people what supply chain is. We start telling them supply chain, they go, oh, that's logistics. I got it. Yeah, it's close. It's not, folks. Logistics is a subset of supply chain management. So let's set the foundation by talking about all the things in supply chain, and then we'll get into the discussion of the different pieces of logistics and some of the things that tie into logistics so we have a better understanding of it. First thing I want to do is what I call my supply chain star. And I came up with this concept about 8 years ago to try to get people to understand how supply chain and operations and logistics fit into every other discipline in business. So let's start up in the left-hand corner with finance. I can't do supply chain without money. The only organization that I know of that can function without money is the federal government. Everybody else needs money to function. If we moving to the right, I can't do supply chain without accounting. I can't do logistics without accounting. We're going to spend some time in a few weeks talking about inventory management. Inventory management is nothing but accounting. What do I have? Where do I have it? How much do I have? Is it an asset or a liability? I can't do supply chain without marketing. In fact, out of all these disciplines here in the business world, I think probably supply chain and marketing are the most closely aligned. You see, I can be the best marketing person in the world, but if there's nothing in the supply chain to get to the customers, it's of no value to market it. Conversely, I can have the greatest products in the world in my supply chain. But if we don't market it, nobody knows I've got it. I can't do supply chain without information systems. Almost every supply chain I've come across in the last 20 years is automated. I came across one when I was consulting that wasn't automated, and they called me in as a consultant to help them automate their supply chain because they realized they need to be automated. So I need to understand information systems to do supply chain, and supply chain to develop information systems. Since almost every supply chain is international in nature, and we've discussed some of that in some of the discussion topics last week, I need to understand international business and all its implications and all its rules and regulations if I want to do supply chain management. I've got to understand business analytics. That's driving the train in every business today. All the numbers, big data. Everybody wants big data. And here's what I've discovered. Almost every survey of CEOs has said they're drowning in data. What they really want is useful information. That's what the analytics people do for us. They provide us with useful information. So as a supply chain person, I need to understand what analytics are important, excuse me, and how to interpret those. As an analytics person, I need to understand what's important from a supply chain perspective. because I want to make sure we're measuring what's important, not just what's easy to measure. I've got to understand business administration and business management. I noticed from the introduction, a lot of y'all said you were business administration majors. As a supply chain person, I've got to understand business administration, business management, foundations, and basics. Because the supply chain is a big, huge piece of business. As a business administration person or business management person, I need to understand the workings of supply chain. That's why I think it's important enough to, in our last real introductory week here, introduce the concept of supply chain so we can drill down into logistics and its functions so we have a broader understanding of how things work in business. Now, this is what I used to ask my folks when I was in the Army. I think it's still a very relevant question. What in the world is not logistics or supply chain related? And the answer is everything is. The clothes you're wearing right now, there's logistics and supply chain backing it up. The computer you're watching this on, multiple supply chains and logistics operations to get you the computer. The food you had for breakfast today, multiple supply chains backing it up. Logistics to get it to your front door or to get it to your store so you can buy it. Everything we do is logistics related. And hopefully I will convince you of that between now and the end of this semester. And this is critical here. And this is what I used to tell the folks who work for me as well when I was in the Army. Supply chain and logistics done well is all but invisible. So what do you mean by that? As long as everything goes right, nobody worries about it. We had some great discussions last week on the discussion board about some of the logistics issues going on today. This is just Joe's theory. And Joe's full of a lot of theories. Some people say Joe's full of a lot of something, but I think I'm full of a lot of theories. My theory is COVID didn't cause a lot of the problems we're seeing today. COVID exposed those problems. See, as long as the supply chains were working what we look like they're working okay, nobody cared about the inefficiencies in the supply chain. But when we started having some interruptions because of our dependency on just in time, all of a sudden, everybody knows about supply chain. 3 years ago, I was lucky if I got one good logistics or supply chain bit of news a month to share with my classes. Now I got to figure out what's most important. When things don't work right, everybody gets concerned about it. When the supply chain and logistics are working right, you don't go to the store and go, oh, look, my favorite coffee's in stock. I wonder how it got here. But when you go to the store and your favorite item is out of stock, as some of y'all mentioned last week, now we're concerned. How come it's not there? Where is it? What ship off the coast is it sitting on? Now, here's another thing, though, that just came up in the last week. Speaking of all but invisible and not being invisible anymore. Apparently, all the issues getting stuff out of California is not because of the ports. There's been multiple reports in the last week in multiple news services and logistics websites about the issue of packages being stolen out of containers sitting on the trains in Los Angeles. Now, I mentioned this on Twitter a couple of weeks ago because I thought it was interesting. And I noticed just a couple of days ago, there was a train derailment. Now, the National Transportation Safety Board is trying to figure out whether this train derailment was as a result of all the debris on the tracks from the theft of packages So if you order something from Amazon, it may not be the port's reason why you aren't getting it. It could have been stolen off the train out of the containers in Los Angeles. Now, I know at least one of the people in this class is going to recognize this. This is the Miraflores locks at the Panama Canal. This is a huge logistics operation. The Panama Canal was expanded in 2016 and the new locks opened up because the original canal, when the US built it, the original canal was built to the width of the largest military ship in the fleet at the time. Well, ships have grown dramatically over the last 20 years. You have the post-Panamax and the neo-Panamax ships that are much larger than what the original locks could handle. If the ship could hold more than about 4,000, 4,500 containers, it couldn't go through the old locks here, which still function 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they opened up the new locks in 2016 for the larger ships to go through it. The larger ships, some of them hold up to 18 to 20,000 containers. When you think about logistics, since it's different from supply chain, let's talk about some of the differences here. Logistics is moving things from point A to point B. So if you think about an airport, I'm moving people, I'm moving cargo from point A to point B. It's logistics function. If you think about a sporting activity, now being the good redneck I am, I've been a long-time NASCAR fan. This is the Kansas Speedway in Kansas City, Kansas, a couple of years ago, before the world stopped turning. The race is the easy part. You got 40 drivers driving around a 1.5-mile track, turning left all day. The logistics piece, that's the difficult part. The logistics of getting the 40 teams in each one of the series, the drivers, the cars, the equipment, the spare parts, from the garages in North Carolina to Kansas City for the race, and then back to North Carolina after the race is over with. That's logistics. That's the difficult part. Getting all the fans into the parking lot, into the racetrack, all the food and the beer and the drinks for those fans into the racetrack, and then getting them out after the race. That's the difficult part. We have the Winter Olympics coming up here real soon. The games themselves, the athletic events, that's the easy part. Getting all the athletes and all of their equipment and all their trainers and their doctors and their support staff to China and back, that's logistics. Housing them and feeding them while they're there, that's logistics. Getting the fans into the stands, getting the souvenirs into the stands, and then getting the fans out, that's logistics. That's the difficult part. That's the part that we've kind of ignored for the last several years. And all these ugly issues in logistics are coming to the surface because we ignored them. We tried to cover them up with inventory to ignore the inefficiencies. And then when the inventory levels dropped, the inefficiencies were still there. We'll talk about that a little more when we get to inventory in a few weeks. Now, sometimes things don't always go well in the supply chain world. I can't tell you what happened here. I really don't know. A buddy of mine sent me this picture and said, check this out. All I can say is being an Army guy, I noticed a few of y'all are either military brats or have served in the Air Force. All I can say here is this is the Marine Corps. I'll just leave it at that. The little inter-service rivalry there. Don't know how they did this. It did take several hours to undo this. There are some illegal supply chains in the world that I just want to touch on because it's a big concern of mine. I took this picture when I was on a photo safari about 10 years ago in South Africa, in the Kruger National Park. There is a huge illegal supply chain involving the rhinoceros. This is a gorgeous animal. Fascinating animal. But apparently, in some societies, the horn of the rhinoceros is considered an aphrodisiac. So people sneak into the game reserves in Africa, kill these beautiful animals, cut off their horn, grind it into dust, and sell it in these societies as an aphrodisiac. Well, here's what I know. The horn of the rhinoceros is the same collagen, obviously a little stronger, a little tougher, same collagen we have in our fingernails. Nobody's ever found my fingernails to be an aphrodisiac. You don't see people going around the different nail salons and collecting clippings and grinding them up. Now, karma being what it is, last year, there were like 4 or 5 poachers going to sneak into the Kruger in South Africa. They were supposedly out there hunting rhinoceros. They went in at night. Karma was with them because they snuck into the Kruger and they stumbled upon a pride of sleeping lions. Apparently, lions are not very nice when you wake them up in the middle of the night. And the hunters got eaten, and the rhinoceros survived. Same thing happens in an illegal supply chain with elephants. That's why they're becoming endangered. Same photo safari. But they kill these elephants just for their tusks, for their ivory, and leave the rest of the animals there in the pride lands to rot. But this isn't a new issue. History books tell me that in the mid-1800s, here in Kansas where I live, and up to the plains where y'all are at, but here in Kansas, there were 18 million buffalo on the prairie. Now I drive through the Flint Hills. I try to envision that, seriously. 18 million buffalo on the prairie in Kansas. And then right about the 1860s time frame, and on into the 1880s, 1890s, apparently buffalo tongue became a delicacy in the Northeast United States. Yeah, of all the things you could use from a buffalo, apparently those folks up in New England area had this hankering for buffalo tongue. I mean, I can understand buffalo steaks, buffalo burgers, buffalo hides. No, buffalo tongue. So buffalo hunters came out in the thousands, started killing these animals, chopping off the tongue, and leave the rest of the animal there to rot on the prairie. Now, my ancestors, when they killed a buffalo, they used the entire thing. The skin, the horns, the eyes, the teeth, the hoofs, the meat, the bones. No, these guys just wanted the buffalo tongue. That's why buffalo are pretty much extinct now. We have a small herd, 4 or 5 buffalo at the back gate of Fort Leavenworth, and a small herd of buffalo at the back gate of Fort Riley, Kansas, to remind us of our prairie roots. And there are a couple of private herds that are grown for the meat, but for the most part, these animals don't exist anymore. because of the illegal supply chain that wiped them out. And I love this quote. I came across this quote a couple of years ago, and I just thought it was great. Because I grew up in the Army as a logistician because we hadn't invented supply chain yet. I thought this was great. I wish I'd had this when I was in the Army to show to my bosses. Behind every great leader, an even greater logistician. If you look at all the military victories in the history of the United States, it's the logistics that made them work. The logistics is what made the Desert Storm work. Our ability to do logistics is what made us successful in World War II. Our ability to do logistics is what made us postured to have been successful in Iraq and Afghanistan. We'll talk about that a little more when we get into some other topics in the course. I love this quote. This came from Alexander the Great, 323 BC. Alexander the Great, there's the term logistics, from 2,300 years ago. My logisticians are a humorless lot. They know if my campaign fails, they're the first ones I will slay. Well, it's kind of depressing for a minute, but it's also kind of encouraging. At least he understood the importance of logistics way back then. Moving to modern day, nobody in the logistics and supply chain worlds want anything to fail because of logistics. Probably the hardest working people in business today trying to solve the problems are the logisticians. How can we make it work? Let me share a couple of videos here with you. See if this is going to work. Hopefully it's going to pull up. Now my internet's working kind of slow here today. Here we go.
This is your living room / yoga shop.
No, not this part here. Let me get to the commercial now. Here we go. So those commercials ran for a long time. And I think it gave the folks around the world a good idea of what was all involved in logistics, or at least part of it. But I think it also contributed to that confusion between logistics and supply chain, because they showed almost the entire supply chain there. But UPS started as a logistics company, moving stuff from point A to point B. I'll show you one more video here. I think this kind of gives you a feel for a lot of things that a lot of people don't discuss or think about as part of logistics.
After all, without efficient logistics, so much is at stake.
I like that video because it makes it look like everything in the world is based upon logistics. And at least from my perspective, I think it is. We're going to talk about some of the logistics impacts on Great Britain as a result of the Brexit as we go through the semester. Another great quote here. Now, this is from General Franks. He was commander of all the ground forces during Desert Storm 30 years ago, which I realize is before most y'all's time. But I think it's a great quote here. And it's not just for the military, but also for the commercial world. Forget logistics and you lose. Well, let me give you a commercial example of that. Most of y'all are familiar with Toys R Us. In 1999, Toys R Us had a great website. I mean, by 2021 standards, 2022 standards, it was a great website. So it was a wonderful website by 1999 standards. But they forgot about the logistics piece. They made a guarantee. You buy by this date, we guarantee Christmas delivery. And then the week before Christmas, they came back and said, we're sorry, but we may not be able to deliver. If you can't deliver by Christmas Day, we'll give you store credits for everything that you ordered. And then they're giving out almost as much as store credits as they took in sales that year. And then the solution was, well, here's what we recommend you do. Okay? We recommend you print off a picture of what you bought and show the picture to your child. Now, luckily, everything I ordered for my kids that year came in because I ordered it well in advance. But how would you feel? Think back to 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, Christmas, Hanukkah, birthday, whatever. How would you feel if your parents said, well, here, look at this picture of what I ordered you. Go play with the picture. I'd have probably got my mouth washed out with soap for saying something really bad, or gotten spanked for saying something bad to my parents if that had happened. They forgot about logistics. Now, the interesting thing, the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story is after that happened, they decided to outsource their logistics, their online sales piece and e-commerce and logistics piece to a small fledgling company that was only about 4 years old at the time by the name of Amazon. And then when Toys R Us had more trouble and they went out of business, they blamed the troubles on Amazon. Big trouble was they ran out of money. They couldn't buy new products. They couldn't get credit for new products to sell new products, so they went out of business. Now, I came across this. I'm a big fan of Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War. I highly recommend it for reading. I think I've said it before. I highly recommend it for reading because all of the Asian business schools are reading The Art of War, and you need to know what your competition is reading. It's a pretty straightforward book. The very first chapter of The Art of War, Sun Tzu says, war is a matter of vital importance. Well, we're going to do some literary licensing. We're going to pull out war and put in logistics, or we can put in supply chain. Now it says logistics or supply chain is a matter of vital importance to the company. It is indeed the road to survival or ruin, as we just saw with Toys R Us. It's the lifeblood of the organization. It's the heart that beats and pumps the blood to the organization. If I can't deliver to the customer, they're going to go somewhere else. He also said the line between disorder and order lies in logistics. Sun Tzu, and we're going to refer to Sun Tzu a couple of times this semester because I like Sun Tzu. I've got about 10 different versions on my bookshelf of Sun Tzu's book. If somebody comes with a new translation, I like to read it, see what it says. Get a copy. You can get a copy for for a couple of bucks on Amazon or on eBay. It's a great book. Quick read. The book itself is only like 14, 15 chapters. Most of the translations have in them is their version of history, what was going on back then. But it's a good book to read. Highly recommend it. So, several definitions of supply chain management we need to look at to kind of set the foundation here. I like this one, but it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of nebulous. The important thing I think in this definition here is that the key in logistics is relationships between us and our suppliers, us and our customers, us and our trucking firms, us and our transportation modes. Critical. There's definition of business logistics and supply chain. And I love this one. It's the whole process of business. That sounds great. Being a logistician my entire life, that makes me sound like we're the most important thing in the business. And I like to think we are. Now, there's several definitions out there of supply chain. Every major professional organization today in the supply chain world has their own definition. Global Supply Chain Forum gives us this one. Now, here's some common terms we're going to see in most definitions. Integration of processes from the end user to the original suppliers. Adding value, Well, that's the whole purpose of operations management, is to add value. Dr. Hanfield is in charge of the program at North Carolina State. One of the fastest growing, one of the highest rated supply chain programs in the country. There's that term integration again. Transformation of goods from raw materials to end user. We just saw that before. He adds in information flows. And he adds this piece that maybe supply chain is my way to have a sustained competitive advantage. Association with Supply Chain Management defines it this way. Pretty much the same things we've seen from everybody else, but they add in this piece that nobody else has mentioned before: cash. We talked about that with a supply chain star. I've got to have cash to make the supply chain work. I don't know if everybody else just assumed we knew we needed cash, because that's not a good assumption in today's business, or they just omitted it because they didn't think about it. I think it's a critical piece of supply chain. Cash. I've got to have cash to make supply chain work. Now, here's one that's been around for a long time. And most companies call this the 6 rights. Some throw in the 7th right, the right product. But the 6 rights here: the right product, the right quantity, the right condition, right time, right place, right invoice. It makes up a metric called the perfect order fulfillment. Now, let's talk about each one of these. Okay? The right product. Getting you the right products. Here's my example of that. About 6 years ago, when I was finishing up my doctorate, I had some shoulder surgery as a result of an automobile accident where Dad decided to drive on the wrong side of the road and run into me. So I had some shoulder surgery to fix it. And my bigger computer was just, it exceeded the doctor's recommended weight limit of what I could pick up. He said nothing heavier than a coffee cup. I don't think he knew how big some of my coffee cups were. So I bought a little tablet-sized computer, notebook size. It came in red, black, silver, and blue. Well, over the course of the last 20 years, I've had several black computers. I've had several silver ones. I had a blue one. I liked it. It was great until technology left it behind. A red one. I've never had a red computer before. That'll make it stick out. People saying, "Oh, that's Joe's computer." So I ordered a red one. The invoice said red. The box said red. The shipping document said red. Oh, get back here. But opened the box up and it was blue. Had all the right bells and whistles that I asked for, just the wrong color. The wrong product. But I kept it, because it makes a great example of the wrong product. The right quantity. Here's what studies show. I send you too many, most people don't say anything about it. If I short you, then you're gonna let me know. Here's my example of that. Right before the world stopped turning, I realized I needed some more 5-pound plates in my gym. I ordered 4, because those who lift weights know you got to have them in even numbers. You can't have odd numbers of plates. I got home from work, picked up the box, and thought, man, must be having a bad day, because this feels like it's heavier than 20 pounds. Opened it up, there were 5 of them in it. Can't really use 5 plates, I need 4. Send them a note. Hey, look, you sent me 5. I either need to send one back, or I need to order another one so I have an even number of plates. Got an email back saying, "Mr. Walden, we carefully checked your package. We can count. We know we sent you 4. So I sent him a picture of the plates with their barcode and their price tag still on them. So this is not an optical illusion. There's 5 there. I too can count. Got a really nasty email back. We don't know where you got the 5th plate from, but we only sent you 4. Okay, fine. Now I've got a 5-pound doorstop. The right condition. That just means if it's fragile, like my coffee cup, if it shows up broken, it's not in the right condition. I can't use it at the right time. This is critical in today's business. We've all become dependent upon just in time. We expect that 1 day, 2 day delivery from Amazon Prime. We expect that 2 day delivery from Walmart.com. If you tell me it's going to be here today, I don't expect to wake up this morning, check my email, and go, oh, dear Mr. Walden, your package has been delayed. It won't be here. It'll be delivered next week. I may not need it next week. It's kind of like, back to my trip to Panama. My flight was delayed a day, but my bags got delayed 3 days. By the time one of the bags showed up with the PPE we needed for some of our visits to some of the distribution centers, we'd already visited them, didn't need it anymore. I needed it the day I landed. I needed clean clothes the day I landed, not next day when that bag showed up. Or the PPE 3 days later when it showed up. At the right place. That just simply means, back to my example of my bags, the right place for my bags to be at the right time was at the Panama City Airport. Not still sitting on the ground in Kansas City. Well, there was a short period of time to load your bags. Really, because I checked in 2.5 hours early for my flight. And you can see the plane at the current Kansas City Airport. You can see the plane from where you're checking in. It's like 30 yards from where I dropped my bag to where the plane's sitting. I had to take, in the case of the one bag, I had to take from Monday to Friday to get to Panama. The right place would be where I'm at, not Kansas City, where I left from. The right invoicing simply means if I order this item, I order this item from your website. You said it's 3 for $10. It shows up and you billed me $20 for it. Not right. Back to my example, the right quantity of the 4 plates that I ordered, and I got 5. The billing was for 4. And I couldn't convince them that they were wrong, so I could pay for the 5th one. So I got a free 5-pound doorstop. We'll look at this perfect order fulfillment. We're probably going to break today's video into 2 videos. So you don't have to sit there and watch for 2 straight hours. We'll talk about this in the second video, this perfect order fulfillment metric. Now, the term supply chain, as I mentioned last week, really started being used in business about 1992 and started becoming popular about 1995. So it's less than 30 years old in business. Not very old when you think about the term logistics has been around at least since the days of Alexander the Great, 323 BC, 2,350 years ago. So about 1995, several major consulting companies and some manufacturing companies got together and said, look, if we're going to actually use this term supply chain, we need to define what it is. We need to have a model of what it looks like. So we can tell people this is what we do. So they developed the Supply Chain Council, which is now part of the Association for Supply Chain Management, and developed what's called the Supply Chain Operations Reference Model. Looks like this. They're on version 13 of the model. They continue to update it to add more best practices, more processes, more metrics. And it morphs with changes in technology. But basically what they say is that every single supply chain out there, I don't care what business you're in, every supply chain out there has 6 basic functions. Somebody's got to plan the supply chain. What are we going to make? Where are we going to make it? How are we going to make it? Who are we going to buy from? Who are we going to sell to? where we're going to have our facilities at. Somebody's got to buy something. Somebody's got to source something. I'm either sourcing raw materials, or I'm sourcing finished goods, or I'm sourcing components to assemble into finished goods. Somebody's got to make something. If you look right here in the middle at the make, if this is Apple, there are over 100 suppliers for my iPhone. So there are 100 of these chains coming in right here at the make, where they assemble the iPhone. Once I make the product, I've got to deliver it either to the next link in the supply chain to take those assemblies and make it into a finished good, or deliver it to the customer, or deliver it to a distribution center so they can deliver it to the store, so they can deliver it to the customer. And then once I've got it, they realized about version 9 of the model, about 13 years ago now, we have this growing problem. We'll talk about this a little bit later in another lecture about reverse logistics, things coming backwards. So they added that function. Then they added the function of enable, all those systems and processes and procedures that are needed to make the other 5 functions work. Now they said the supply chain runs from the supplier's suppliers to the customer's customers. Well, we saw that with other definitions, from end user to raw materials. A couple of critical links in the supply chain to keep the supply chain running. My supply chain is linked to my supplier's supply chain at my sourcing and their deliver function. My supply chain is linked to my customers at my deliver and their sourcing function. But unfortunately, I'm also linked in the supply chain by the return function. Stuff coming backwards. That's why we're going to spend a little time later in the course talking about reverse logistics, because it's a huge, huge growing problem in supply chains around the world. There's some logistics and supply chain activities we need to look at. Customer service. Talk about that a little more in just a few minutes. We're going to look at forecasting. We're going to look at inventory management. Communications are critical in any aspect of business. Order processing is critical, so I can get what the customer needs and process the order and get them what they need. We'll talk a little bit about site selection. Where do I put my facility at? That's a critical part of logistics. Talk a little bit about procurement, because that's critical as well. As I mentioned before, we're going to look at reverse logistics later in the course. And we'll talk a little bit about transportation and traffic management, because that's a critical piece. It's a standalone piece within the supply chain, but it's critical to understand it to make logistics work. We're going to look at warehousing and storage a little bit today and in greater detail next week. We're talking about security, because that's a critical piece of the supply chain and a critical piece of logistics. We mentioned earlier today the theft of products off containers, off of trains, supply chain security. And the inability to do the supply chain security has resulted in 17 cars derailing in Los Angeles earlier this week. Here's a great example of delivery. Right condition. Now, luckily, this is a 25 kilo plate, 55 pounds. I needed calibrated plates to run powerlifting meets. Actually, in this particular order, ordered 6 of them. I wanted to see the quality of these plates. Ordered 6. 5 of them came in at the same time on the same order. 5 came in at the same time. The 6th one showed up 3 days later, and you can see the condition of the package that it was in. Now, luckily, like I said, it's a cast iron plate, so it's kind of hard to mess it up. But packaging has become an art and science all of its own to ensure the product shows up in the right condition. Here's some things that have impacted supply chain management over the last couple of decades. Globalization. And some of y'all touched on that in the discussions last week. We talked about the history of logistics. Increased competition. That's critical. Anybody who's got a website can have e-commerce. Anybody who's got e-commerce needs logistics to deliver the product, get it to me. Information technology is critical, and in most cases, it's made logistics and supply chain work better. Shorter product life cycles. That just means the products aren't lasting as long. It impacts logistics, and we're going to talk about this a little more when we talk about product design and some of the implications of that on logistics networks. Within logistics, and now within supply chains, there's this concept called the bullwhip effect. It gets its name from bullwhips, like in the picture here. And most bullwhips, this one's got a longer handle. Most bullwhips have, I don't know, 12, 18-inch handle. And then it's got braided leather attached to it. It's designed for herding cattle. But the name, the bullwhip effect, comes from what happens. A small change at this end of the bullwhip on the handle creates huge distortions, depending on the length of the bullwhip, or in this case, the length of the supply chain, creates huge distortions in the supply chain. It's tied to the passing of information in the supply chain. Now, I had the opportunity to lead a program for the Army called Velocity Management. It was the Army's attempt, and in some cases, a very successful attempt, to improve the logistics functions within the supply chain to make logistics work better in the Army. When I first started doing it, this concept came out, the idea of replacing inventory with information. This just baffled my mind. I'm a simple kind of guy. I asked my boss about it because I was working for a genius at the time. Seriously, this guy was probably one of the smartest guys I've ever worked for. He said, Joe, think about it. In most cases, we have inventory to cover up inefficiencies in the supply chain, right? Which is what's happened now. We've reduced inventory levels, but the inefficiencies are still there. We're going to touch on that in greater detail when we talk about inventory in a few weeks. But if I pass better information flow, my distortion is less. If the distortion is less, I need less inventory. Oh, I've got it. What we're seeing right now at the ports in the logistics is an example of the bullwhip effect. Demand for products went down when we got shut down in 2020 for COVID. When we finally started reopening last year, demand for products went through the roof. And the ports couldn't keep up. And the manufacturers couldn't keep up. That's why there's so much stuff waiting to get into the ports now. So we can get it in the distribution centers to get the right product on the shelf. Now, in my own ground classes, we get to play a game called the beer game. Now, don't get upset, folks, because there's no beer involved in it. It'd make the game a whole lot more fun if it was. But it's a computer simulation to look at what happens when there's small changes in the supply chain and you cannot pass good information in the logistics system. This is from one of the games a few semesters ago. You can see what happened here. Just in nine weeks, just a small change in the purple line there, the customer demand, created huge distortions in the rest of the supply chain. That's the bullwhip effect in action. In a perfect world, we know exactly what's sold, when it was sold, where it was sold, so we can replenish it. But as we're seeing at the backup at the ports right now, and the backup at the factories, we still don't live in a perfect world. The better the flow of information, the less distortion. Less distortion, less inventory I need to cover the distortion. There's some uncertainties in the supply chain. We're looking at forecasting. The first rule of forecasting is forecasts are usually wrong. Because of that, you have the bullwhip effect. Lead times fluctuate, which creates uncertainty. Because that we do batch ordering to try to cover up the uncertainties of the lead times. We get inflated orders to try to cover up for distortions. And because of that, we have uncertainty in the supply chain, which leads us to have a form of insurance we call inventory. Inventory is there as an insurance policy against stocking out. And apparently right now we're not doing a good job in our insurance policies of preventing stockouts in the supply chain. So let's look at information flow. Now this is just one of Joe's theories, one of my ideas. Almost every organization in the world now has a chief information officer. I think you need to have a chief supply chain information officer to control all the flow of information in the supply chain. Give us one point of contact. I want to integrate all these things into my supply chain information system because they're all integrated together. So I'll make sure they're all looped together into the same information system so that I don't have siloed information. I want access to global and domestic transportation networks so I can make sure I have an uninterrupted flow of product to the customer. Now I want to know where everything's at. I want visibility in my supply chain. One of the ways I can do this is through radio frequency identification tags. They're great. We'll talk about these a little more when we talk about product design and process design. I want to be able to consolidate the purchases. One, because I want to have fewer deliveries. Two, because I want to be able to make sure I get those bulk quantity discounts in my organization. I want access inside the company and outside the company. I want built-in redundancy in my information system. So if the system goes down, I can still communicate. Electronic data interchange it was a big deal back in the 80s. It's still a big deal now. It's a big deal back in the 80s because we didn't all have email and the internet back in the 80s. It's just simply passing information in a format that your supplier or your customer's computer can translate it. You order something from Amazon. You go to the Amazon website, you pick out what you want, you put it in your cart, you tell them how you're going to pay for it, you hit submit, confirm the order. It puts the information in the Amazon system in a format the Amazon computers can use it. That's all it is. Could be as simple as an email or an online form you fill out, electronic data interchange. I want to capture data at the point of sale. And one of the ways I can do this is through the barcode. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I want to make sure I'm capturing the right information to reduce that information fluctuation and reduce the need to have excess inventory to cover the inefficiencies. And I want my system to instantaneously update the inventory levels. So what does that really mean? If I've got a website and you go in and order something, as soon as you order it, instantaneously, it should update the system and delete that from the inventory level. However, I've dealt with some companies recently who don't update their system instantaneously. So what happens is you buy this item online, there's one on the shelf, but somebody just bought it 5 minutes earlier. It didn't instantaneously update. Somebody already got that product. So now you're going to get an email saying, we're sorry, but we're out of stock right now. And that ain't good. So one of the ways I can get visibility, as I said earlier, is through barcodes. Barcodes have been around for a long time. The Army tried using barcodes back in the 60s. They came up with a system called logistics marking, or LOGMARS. They're going to put basically a barcode on every vehicle shipped into Vietnam, and then decided it was too difficult to do. Which may explain why we couldn't account for all of our vehicles over there. We're all familiar with the basic barcodes on each side of the screen here. The UPC on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, and the QR code or the 2D barcode on the left-hand side. We see these all the time. QR codes becoming more and more popular as more restaurants are going to not having paper menus. You got to scan the QR code to get the menu on your phone. The benefit of the QR code is you can scan it from any direction and get the same information. The UPC, or the standard barcode on the right-hand side here, I can only scan it from one direction to get the information. Upside down, sideways, it won't scan right. Now in the 70s, late 70s, when they first started coming out with the universal product code, they said, we're going to put this barcode on every product. It's going to allow the stores to scan it. It'll update the inventory. They change the price. They change it in the computer, change the price on the shelf, and it automatically updates. Problem was they started putting barcodes on stuff before the barcode readers were ready to be shipped out to the different stores. It took a couple of years. Then when the barcode readers came out, late 70s, early 80s, we didn't do a good job of educating the public what this thing really did. So everywhere you went, there were 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that said, if the scan price doesn't match the shelf price, we'll refund the difference. In fact, I saw one of those in Missouri last year. I thought it was kind of funny that they were still up there. Then about the mid 80s, Walmart said, you know what? They were right. We can scan this thing, update the inventory. We can share this with our suppliers. So now when they scan something at Walmart, within nanoseconds, they know it in Bentonville, and a few nanoseconds left later, the supplier knows it was sold at this particular Walmart. You need to start planning for the next delivery. There's some issues in IT. Today, some of the systems that are out there, because we don't talk well with the folks developing the systems, back that supply chain star I showed you earlier, some of the systems are so sophisticated, the workers that have to implement them can't understand them. As we talked about with Toys R Us, just because they have a nice website doesn't mean I have a nice supply chain and logistics issues, processes to take care of the customer. And security is an issue. We're going to talk about supply chain security later in the semester. It's a huge issue that is not in most textbooks that I think is critical to talk about because it's a growing problem. We touched on it today already. The theft of packages from containers on the trains in Los Angeles. I want to take a break here. So we can break this into a couple of videos. Take a break. Give you this in a couple of small chunks so you don't have to spend 2 or 3 hours watching the video at one time. So we'll break here. We'll come back right here, pick up on the next video. So take a break, go grab something to eat. I'll see you in a few minutes.